In the Maimer Va'ata Tetzaveh, we're in the middle of chapter 9. So we're chapter 9 in the Hebrew handout that we have here, somewhere in the middle of the first paragraph. If you're following along in the Nurturing Faith, so that would be on page 60. The paragraph begins with the word similarly towards the bottom of page 60 and page 61 via Shleimah. So what we've been talking about is as follows. We said that the verse Va'ata Tetzaveh es Bnei Yisrael tells us that Moshe connects the people with godliness. In what sense, in what way does he connect the people with godliness? This means that the person naturally has a faith in God, but the faith remains abstract. And Moshe is mefarnes hasamana. He nurtures the faith of the people. That the role of the leader of the generation is to nurture their faith. That their faith should be internalized. It should be something that'll affect them on a conscious level as well. In this mimer here, so that's generally when we refer to the role of Moshe as it regards to faith. We say we're talking about him feeding, so to speak, the faith to the people, that the faith should be internalized. In this mimer, the Rebbe takes it another step further, a little deeper, and he says that it's not just when we say that Moshe nurtures the faith, it doesn't mean merely that he nurtures the people with faith, but that he actually nurtures the faith itself, meaning that the faith itself that he feeds the people is a higher faith. So it's the faith itself that he's affecting. And what does that mean? So we said that why do people believe in God naturally? One reason is because their soul in heaven sees God. And another reason, a deeper reason, is because their soul, the essence of their soul, is actually a part of God. What's the difference with these two types of faith? So we said that when a person has the first kind of faith, the faith that his soul sees godliness, so that's something that remains abstract. That's something that doesn't affect them in a conscious way. And because faith is faith, your intellect and your emotions, those are internal. Your body, your mind, and your heart are not receptive to that higher level, that idea of faith that's a little bit that's really transcendent, that's beyond it. So one thing is that the faith, this higher level of faith, the faith that comes from the essence of the soul, is one that can be internalized, because when you're talking about the essence of the soul is the essence of the entire soul, both the part of the soul that remains above in heaven and the part of the soul that's within the body, within the person. So that faith has the capacity to be internalized. That was number one. Number two, we said, was that when you talk about faith that comes from seeing God, so when you say that the soul sees God, it means that there's the soul and there's God. They're two separate entities. The soul sees God, and therefore God's existence is unquestionable and undeniable, and therefore the soul believes in God. And a person may be willing to commit themselves and dedicate their lives to this reality that they see, which is outside of themselves. So while a person might be willing to sacrifice, to give his life for this, for God whom he sees, it's not certain. He doesn't have to. He will have a choice to make. But when we talk about the higher level of faith, the one that stems from the fact that the soul is a part of God, here there is no choice. As we discussed, the idea of self-sacrifice in this mimer, what we've been discussing is that self-sacrifice means not just that a person is willing to give his life, but even if he's not willing, he can't not give it. He's compelled to, because because to deny God is to deny his very essence. And so therefore that's not even a process, a conscious decision that he has to make. He's incapable of not giving his life. That's the level we're talking about. So that's the difference between the higher level and the lower level of faith. And we said that what's the role of Moshe and the subsequent Moshe in every generation is to nurture the faith, meaning to awaken and to reveal the higher level of faith of the essence of the soul within every person. Now, then we said there's a difference between the way Moshe did it, Moshe Rabbeinu, and the way subsequent Moshes, the Moses of later generations, did it. Because when Moshe did it, when Moshe nurtured the faith of his people, what he did was he caused it to come to be internalized, to affect them on a conscious level. The idea that your faith affects you on a conscious level is a proof that what faith are we tapped into? We're tapped into the higher level, because as we said, if it's something that's conscious, if it's something that can impact the person within the body, so then it's only because it's the essence of the faith and the soul that's in the body. That's the highest level. That's the essence of the soul. So the idea that a person can live his life consciously affected by the faith is proof that what level of faith is he accessing? The higher level. But in later generations, and specifically we're talking about the generation of Mordechai in the story of Purim, what happened was he brought the people to a level of self-sacrifice. We've explained before, what's the connection, how does self-sacrifice, we asked those questions, we answered, we're getting through the summary of where we're up to now at this point, which is that self-sacrifice is a function of the higher level of the soul. As we just explained, that when a person recognizes that his essence is one with God, he's incapable of denying his own essence. That's self-sacrifice. So if self-sacrifice is not merely a proof, as it were, that what's functioning within you is the higher level of faith, it's actually a function of the higher level of faith. It's an expression of the higher level of faith. When a person has self-sacrifice, what is causing it? It's the essence of the soul. So when a person is living his life informed by his faith, that's proof that what faith does he have is the higher level, but it's not a function of that faith. When a person has self-sacrifice, that is an expression of, that's the higher level of faith in practice, in action.
That's really the only time that you're experiencing it.
Yeah. Now we said, well, we'll get to something beyond that in a moment. So then we finish chapter 8 by asking, if we look at the verse, so we can understand the verse, V'ata Tetzaveh, we understand the connection between Mordechai and Moshe, and they're impacting the people. And we explained, V'ata Tetzaveh is Bnei Yisrael. The verse says, V'ata Tetzaveh is Bnei Yisrael, you command, Moses, you connect, Tetzaveh, connect the people with their essence. And through that is Kasis Lamar, when in a time of exile, in time of persecution, when it's Kasis, when you're being crushed, when you're being persecuted, that's when more you reach the higher level, the essence, the source of the light, the essence of the essence of the soul, the source of light. And we had asked, why is it that we started by talking in the Maimer, in the previous Rebbe's discourse, which our discourse is based on, he starts by talking about Moses, that he nurtures the faith. As we just explained what that means in this Maimer, the higher, that he nurtures the faith itself. Then we went on to say that Moses in every generation, particularly Mordechai we were talking about, he also does the same thing. He brings the people to self-sacrifice. And then we said you reach the essence. We said if the whole point of if we first finish talking about Moses nurtures the higher level of faith, and through that we reach the source, the essence, right? Because that's what Moses is doing. And then go on to talk about Mordechai, that the same is true of Mordechai, but he interjects the story of Mordechai, the idea that Mordechai brings the people to self-sacrifice, in middle of the discussion about Moshe's role, which is to nurture the faith, to connect the people, and then to bring them to the higher level, to the source, to their essence. So, based on what we just said, we understand it. Because since where do we actually see the essence of the soul in action? Where do we see it functioning in action? That's specifically in a situation of self-sacrifice. Which is why first he starts talking about Moshe. Then from Moshe he departs, he moves on to talk about Mordechai and the self-sacrifice that the subsequent Moses brings his people to. And that is an illustration of Kasis Lamor. That's when we really get it. In other words, Mordechai, in a sense, even though Mordechai and Moshe were, for the most part, doing the same thing, nurturing that higher level of faith, but where was this idea expressed most? Not by Moshe, but by his successor, by Mordechai. Because in times of Moshe, the people need self-sacrifice. In times of Mordechai, they did, and that's where that is seen. So that's all good and fine. The problem is that there's another piece missing from the verse that we didn't address. And that is that in the verse itself, that explains the sequence of the ideas in the Maimer. But the verse itself says, Moshe, you connect the people. Then it says, V'yichlecha shemen zayzach, they'll bring to Moses oil. And as we explained in chapter 2, what does it mean that they'll bring oil to Moses? That the people bring Moses to a higher level. They bring Moshe to a higher level. That Moshe has his role, his responsibility, which is to nurture the faith. By him doing what he needs to do, nurturing the faith, through that, V'yichlecha shemen zayz, the people bring Moshe to a higher level. And then he goes back to Kasis Lamor. So there are two things going on here. There's the effect Moshe has on the people, which seemingly in the Maimer is Va'ata Tetzaveh, nurturing their faith, and then Kasis Lamor, bringing the people through in a time of persecution to self-sacrifice, when they can reach the essence of light, which is a direct result of what Moshe does for the people, right? So that's Moshe's impact on the people, Kasis Lamor. But in the middle it says V'yichlecha, which is the effect people have on the people have on Moshe. How does that fit in the middle? It seems to disrupt the sequence seems to be out of order in the verse. So that we started to address in chapter 9. And we said, we began by prefacing the idea of Going back to the story of Purim, that in the time of Purim there were two acceptances. We said that the people accepted upon themselves what they began during Mount Sinai, that at Mount Sinai the people started to observe the commandments, started to observe the Torah, but when did they really ratify it? When was that fully accepted? It was only in the time of Purim. And we said that in the time of Purim they accepted it in two stages. There's the acceptance that occurred during the time of the decree, during the time leading up to the day that they were supposed to be annihilated. There's that self-sacrifice, when they didn't entertain a thought of renouncing their faith and being spared from this decree. And then there is the acceptance, which is the simple meaning of the verse in the Megillah, which is when did they accept, when was the acceptance? Acceptance was after the miracle was over, after the threat was already no longer there, that's when they accepted. And we said that that's a higher level of acceptance. Why is it a higher level of acceptance? Because it came afterwards. If they reached the highest level by accepting during the time of the decree, why would they have to re-accept again? So the fact that they accepted later means that there was a higher level. And now we're in the middle of chapter 9. V'yesh leimar. Right in the middle of the first paragraph of chapter 9. So now we're going to explain this. We're going to apply this to the idea of kasus, to the idea of self-sacrifice, or the impact of being crushed, being persecuted. What is the impact of being crushed have that leads the person to the source of light, to the essence of the soul, to ma'ar? We'll see here that there are also two stages. So too we can say with regard to the idea of kasis lamar, crushed for a luminary, crushed to reach the essence of the light. That when we say that there's kasis lamar, just as we said that in the time of Purim there are two types of acceptance, there's the acceptance during the decree, and there's the acceptance after. We could say the same is true with regard to these words, kasis lamar, in the verse, that there are two stages in kasis lamar. And all this, by the way, is working up to address how kasis lamar comes after we said that the people are enhancing Moshe. Right? Because seemingly, Tetzaveh and kasis lamar have to do with the impact Moshe has on the people. V'koy lecha has to do with the impact the people have on Moshe. How does that, what's the sequence in the verse? So we're working up towards that. So he says like this, that there are two things in kasis lamar. The first one is Yisrael nimtzoyim b'matzav shel kasis mitzad zeh sheyesh lem gzeiros al kiyum Torah mitzvos, k'moi shehaya b'zman amiras hamaymer. The first stage is, which is also, the Rebbe says in the parentheses, like the situation when the Friedrich Rebbe said his Maimer. The previous Rebbe said this discourse 1927. This was this discourse was under a terrible persecution of the communists, and the discourse, this very discourse that ours is based on, is one of the things that led to his actual arrest just a few months later. So that was a time of persecution. So when there's persecution, when there are decrees, when the people are being prohibited from observing Torah mitzvahs, so through that kasus, through that being crushed, they reach the essence, they reach the source of light, the luminary, through their self-sacrifice. But then there's a second idea in this idea in kasus lamar, which is shagam kishzarim tzayim matzav shalachava, that even when the people are in a time of prosperity, archava begashmis v'gam archava beruchnis, both material prosperity and even spiritual prosperity, elashem nimtzayim begalus, but they are in exile. V'adarech hamatzav shayil achrein as the Purim shal Yehudim v'sa'ira v'simcha v'sasim v'kar b'pashtus v'gam beruchnis. And just as it was in the time of Purim, remember we're comparing these two stages of kasus lamar to the two acceptances in the story of Purim. There's the acceptance under persecution, then there's the acceptance that happened after. After the threat was gone and they celebrated Purim, the people were in a state of prosperity. Why? Because they like the verse says, the people, to the Jews there was light and joy and gladness and honor. And so that means literally that it was good times. But even the Talmud explains that all these ideas, light and gladness and joy and honor, are a reference to different mitzvahs. The different light is Torah and joy is Yom Tov, is the festivals. Honor is Tefillin, etc. So So we see that the people also had sort of a spiritual renaissance. There was spiritual prosperity. Now there was no decree, there was no threat to their lives. They're no longer in mortal danger. But also spiritually they were free to serve God as they pleased. And their service of God was flourishing. And Viseirim is even more so. Shagam Beis Haman nitan la Esther. The verse says that Achashverosh, after the story, the king gives Esther Haman's house, Haman's home, which means this means there was a time of transformation. It wasn't just that they were able to vanquish their enemy, that they were able to defeat the enemy and eliminate the decree, but there was also there was transformation that took place here, which represents even a higher level of spirituality, a level where there's a certain level of service of God where a person can overcome their difficulties, overcome their challenges. A higher level is when not only do you overcome your challenges, but you actually transform them. So now this transformation represents an even higher level. So they're on a very high spiritual level. So what was missing? What was the problem then? The Gemara says they were still servants of Achashverosh. They were still his subjects. Achashverosh, the Gentile and somewhat crazy king, was still there. They were still under his jurisdiction, under his leadership. So because they were still under foreign rule, the fact that they were still in exile, even though there was no threat to them, there was no persecution against serving God, even though not only was there no persecution, but they were in a time of flourishing spiritual practice. Nevertheless, they were still in exile. They didn't have the temple, and they were still under foreign rule, and so therefore they were broken by the fact they were in exile. And through being crushed by the fact that you're in exile, through that we reach the essence. So this is the foundation of the explanation here. That there are two stages in Kasis Lamar. There's the first level of Kasis Lamar, which is you reach the essence through persecution, which we've explained before what that means. That when a person, when the situation calls for self-sacrifice, when there's a challenge to a person's Judaism, to his Jewishness, that situation calls for self-sacrifice. We know that is an expression of the essence of the soul, right? Because why is a person able to sacrifice, or more accurately, why is he unable not to sacrifice himself? Because that his essence of his soul is now functioning, is now operating. And now we're saying there's another level, which is kasis, that a person's crushed from the fact that he's in exile. So there's no persecution, there's no threat, and yet he's devastated, he's broken because he's in exile. This second level, we have to understand two things about it. Number one, we have to understand, what does this have to do with the essence of the soul? We're talking about the higher level. The essence of the soul is now awoken in the person, is now active in the person. We understand the connection between that, the impact, the awakening of the essence of the soul has on self-sacrifice. But in a time where there's no self-sacrifice, the person is just devastated, is in exile, what connection does that have with the essence of the soul? So that's number one. And number two, we have to understand why this is a higher level of the essence of the soul. Why is this a higher function of the essence of the soul than even the level of self-sacrifice? We have to understand these two things. So the first one we'll explain now, the second part of chapter 9, and the second one we'll get to in chapter 10. Okay, so let's first explain now, in the second paragraph here in chapter 9, we need to understand the connection between being devastated that we're in exile and the essence of the soul. What's the connection? What's the link between these two? Okay. So by the way, at note 41, we skipped note 41. He mentions that there are two stages in the acceptance. There's the stage of reaching the essence of kasis. There's the stage that happens during persecution, and the stage of after when the threat was no longer there. So note 41, the Rebbe just notes that in the previous Rebbe's Maimer that this is based on. So he brings over there Zman HaGolus, that there's the person's devastated in the time of exile, and in the summary, the previous Rebbe's Mamar, many of them have summaries at the end of every chapter. So there he says Hazman Hagolus Vagzeri. He doesn't mention the time of in chapter 15 in his discourse. He just mentions the time of exile. In the summary, he mentions exile and threat. So you see that there are two stages. But okay, let's keep going here. So Inyan who dezesh Yisrael imshurim mizeshem begalus kam sheyesh lamar chave begash misaberuchnis ukidr tzenu amiti shokalachad miYisrael ushiyeh gilelikus. This is one of the chidushim, one of the new ideas that the Rebbe reveals to us in this Maimer. This is probably the central theme in the Maimer, or the most impactful message in the Maimer, from which everything then flows. And that is, the Rebbe says that the fact that a person is devastated, is crushed from the fact that he's in exile, even when he has everything he needs, even when life is good, both materially and spiritually, but he's in exile. Why is a person crushed from an exile? If everything's going well for him, both materially and spiritually, why is he devastated? Because his true desire, the true desire of every single Jew, is that that God should be revealed in this world. And what does it mean when we say that this is the true desire The true Ritzaynai ha'amiti, the true desire, every single Jew. What does this mean? That it's va'ad shezagilei elokus negel etzem tziyusay. This is something that affects him on his very essence, at his very core. The idea that Jews' desire is that God should be revealed in this world. That's the essence. That's at the core of every single one of us. V'lachin zeh shebizman hagolos ein mer gilei elokus k'may shoy bizman habayis. See, sometimes you can cheat and you can tell. In every mimer, every one of the Rebbe's mamarim, you'll find, generally, when the Rebbe gets to the crux of the explanation, because the Rebbe's mamarim are typically based on other mamarim. Here, this one is based, the Rebbe is arriving at his conclusion, not only from what the previous Rebbe says in the mimer that the Rebbe is basing his mimer on, but actually from the sequence of ideas, the flow of ideas in his mimer. But then you'll get to a point where suddenly there are no footnotes. So there are references to everything the Rebbe says. It's referenced extensively, and then you'll get to a place where you have very limited footnotes are suddenly scarce. You know, this is where the Rebbe is introducing his idea, his contribution to what's going on, and it's usually taking it to a whole nother level. The Rebbe typically reveals something even deeper than what had been revealed up to this point. And here the Rebbe reveals, it's quite a bombshell of a revelation, that at the essence, at our core, what's our desire? Our desire is that God should be revealed in this world. And therefore, since now, in the time of exile, there's no revelation of godliness as was in the time of the temple, especially were you to consider and reflect on the fact that the sages say that one in whose time the temple wasn't rebuilt, it's as if the temple was destroyed. In other words, we live in a time post-temple. We're already 2,000 years after the temple time. So we can sit around and cry that the temple was destroyed, but you can't compare the crying 2,000 years later to the crying that happened by the people when they were actually seeing the temple up in flames. So, but the Chazal, the sages tell us that if the temple wasn't rebuilt in your days, it's as if it was just destroyed today. So it's not the 2,000-year-old story. It's happening now. You have to put yourself in that position where you have that image, that picture, that it's being destroyed right now. So that's a much higher level of devastation. It's a much higher that's way more impactful. So when we reflect on the fact that now we don't have the revelation of godliness as was during the temple, and not only do we not have that, but because we don't have it, it's as if it was just destroyed now in our lifetime. So from this idea alone, he's completely shaken, he's cusses, he's crushed. And even if this individual that we're talking about, this Jew, who's reflecting upon this, is on a level where he has the temple, like he says in note 47, that when it came to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, we discussed in a previous discourse at length, it was as if the temple wasn't destroyed in his life. He experienced the same spiritual revelation in his own life as was experienced during the time of the temple. So it's as if the temple wasn't destroyed for him. Nevertheless, the fact that this is only felt by him, it's his own personal experience, but not felt in the world at large, it's proof that even what's revealed to him is also limited. Otherwise it would be felt by others. What is it? So let's look at it outside a second, and then we'll get into then we'll read the next line inside. What does that mean? When the light is shining, if it's shining only in one area, it means the light is limited. If you turn on a light and there's a place that is dark, then obviously the light is limited in its reach. It only reaches a certain point, which means that the light that you turn on is not an infinite light; it's a limited light. So the fact that you can be a tzaddik, that you're so tapped in, you're so dialed in, you're so connected, that in your own personal life there's godly revelation, there's a divine light. But the fact that others are in the dark means that the light that you have is a limited light. It's not the infinite light. And what did we say? The person's desire is that godliness should be revealed in the entire world. What are we talking about? The essence of God, like you mentioned before. Dir b'tachteinim, a home for God, for what? For God's essence. So if the essence is going to be revealed, then the essence should be revealed everywhere, just as we talked about the higher level of faith. That how is it that it affects the person internally? Because it's the essence of both the higher part of the soul and the lower part. It's the essence of all of it equally, and therefore it can be equally in both in a transcendent level and on a personal, intimate level. So the same idea is here. If the light is not shining everywhere, then it's already a limited light. It's not the same thing. This idea that we mentioned from Rashbi, I think it was Matal Chernobler, one of the great Chassidic masters, who there was a rumor in town that Mashiach had arrived. So they came to tell the Rebbe that Mashiach had come. I think it was Chernobler. And he hears that the Mashiach comes, so the first thing he goes to the window, he opens up the window, he sniffs outside, he says, no, Mashiach didn't come yet. So the question is asked, why? Either Mashiach did come or didn't come. If he could tell, then why do you have to open the window? Why did you go sniff what was going on outside? You imagine that shtetl, what it was like outside. But why do you have to sniff outside? So it's explained that in his room he was experiencing Mashiach. In his room he smelled Mashiach. That light was present in his room. He needed to open the window and smell what's going on outside. But the fact that outside there's no Mashiach means that the Mashiach that he's experiencing in his own room, the revelation of godliness that he's feeling, is limited to his room. It's a limited one. It's not the ultimate. Let's see what he says inside. When the infinite light is shining, so because it's infinite, it means that it's everywhere. And when there's one spot, even one far-flung corner, where there's no light of God shining, it means this is proof that the light that is shining is a limited one. If there's even one corner, if the world is 99.999% godly revelation, but there's just a fraction of a percentage point in which that's dark, where God's light is not shining, then it's not really the infinite light. Then it's not the ultimate. The Rebbe is sending shluchim to the most far-flung places. There shouldn't be a pina nidachas. There shouldn't be a far-flung place where God hasn't reached, where the light of Torah hasn't reached. That was his concern. We saw it in practice. So now let's look at the brackets. Masha Muva b'Maimer Ad Morazak and Disibet Tekunim Shafilim Ha'Tzadik Ech T'Chayz B'Tshuva Shlema V'Dei Ha'Ba Mashiach K'Idei Tshuva Shlema Mamshichim Gilei Erin Seif HaBligvul V'Gilei Zehu B'Chol Makom. The Rebbe says in one of his discourses that were there to be one tzaddik in a generation who would have performed who would had proper tshuva, proper repentance, then Mashiach would come. Why? Okay, so what does this mean? So that's a lengthier conversation. The idea of repentance of a tzaddik is the idea of repentance. Return is not about repenting from sin. It's about accessing the essence of the soul. This is we're not going to. I don't want to get into it here, this conversation. But that's the point: is that repentance, tshuva, means essentially. That's why tshuva has the ability to undo past misdeeds. But when we talk about tshuva in its highest form, it's applicable both to sinners and non-sinners, to the wicked and to the righteous, which is the idea of accessing the essence of the soul that's beyond all of us. So if you access the core of the soul, the essence of the soul, so now you've released into the world that energy, and since it's the essence, since it's the ultimate infinite core, so once you've accessed it for yourself, it's accessed for everywhere. It's triggered everywhere. No tzaddik has been able to do that. So that's what Alter Rebbe says. If one tzaddik be able to do that, or one tzaddik to have the true tshuva, the tshuva in its highest form, as is explained, then once you access that light, then it opens it up. The floodgates are open, and then there's nowhere. It overflows everywhere. It spills out everywhere. And from the fact that to the person. So before we said gilei oir, right? What did we say? That what does he want? He wants a gilei elikus. Here he's saying, what does it mean that he wants a gilei elikus? He wants a revelation of godliness. It means we want the essence of God to be revealed. So from the fact that the essence of God is not revealed in this world, he's completely crushed. He's kasus. He's devastated. He's broken and he's crushed. It's known that there are 50 gates of understanding, of divine understanding, and a person who has only 49 gates, meaning he's almost there. He has 49 out of 50 gates. It's pretty good, but he's lacking. He's a chayla. That's what it says about Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu was lacking because he was missing the 50th gate that God then bestowed upon him. But chayla, the word chayla, which means unwell, ill, sick, that is the numerical value of 49, and that's because even somebody who's reached the 49 gates of understanding, he's reached pretty much the peak a human can reach, but he's missing that 50th gate, he's a chayla, he's sick. So it affects you completely. Okay. So this is the connection we see between the essence. We're going to clarify it a little bit more now, the second half of this paragraph. But we're trying to explain what's the connection between the fact that a person is crushed for being in exile, not from persecution, but from the fact that he's in exile, with the essence of the soul. So he said, because at the essence, at the core of the soul, what does a person want? He wants the revelation of godliness, the revelation of the essence of God in this world. And if it's not revealed in this world, then the person's crushed. If you do, it's known what the Tetzaveh Tzedek writes about the Alter Rebbe, that Hoya Nishma would be heard from the Alter Rebbe, that he would say, Ich will je gar nicht. Ich will nicht ein Gan Eden, ich will nicht ein Elam Haba chulu, ich will men nicht as dich allein. The Alter Rebbe would say, at times of great rapture and devotion, or maybe even other times, he would say, you just call out, I don't want anything. I don't want your Gan Eden, your Garden of Eden. I don't want heaven. I don't want Elam Haba. I don't want the world to come. I want nothing but you alone. God would say, I don't want any of these things from God. I just want God. I just want you. What does that mean? That what was the Alter Rebbe expressing? What was the idea that he was expressing at this time? He was saying that what is it that he wants, and we'll see soon that applies then to us, or empowers us to feel the same way. What he wants is the essence of God. So heaven, the world to come, all of these things are wonderful. They're very holy, they're very spiritual, they're very pleasurable, but they're not God himself. They're not the essence of God. And all he wants, what does he want at his core? None of those things, none of these great levels, and no enlightenment, and no spiritual ecstasy. He wants the essence of God. I just want you. I just want you. The fact that this is something that was heard from the Alter Rebbe, the Pirush Hoya Nishma, the fact that the words that the Tzemach Tzedek uses is that it was Hoya Nishma, it would be heard, meaning that it was meaning that it wasn't just in specific times, but it was a fairly common occurrence for the Alter Rebbe to say this, to express this sentiment. First of all, the Alter Rebbe would say this seemingly regularly. And the fact that the Tzemach Tzedek then revealed it to us, so through this, the fact that we know about it, that it was taught to us, means that it affects us. There's a reason for us to know about it. And that is that it empowers us to feel the same way. That to the extent that the fact that it was told to us means that it empowers us to echo this sentiment, and so that we should be that when we are lacking this revelation, this divine revelation, and especially in a time of exile when we don't even have the revelation that was in the time of the temple. So we are crushed. And we ask 3 times a day or more, if we have more, on Shabbos, Yom Tov, or Yom Kippur, we're asking more than in 3 prayers. And in all of them we say, our eyes should see the return of God to Zion with compassion. At that time when God will return to Zion, meaning the time of the redemption, time of Mashiach, that's when there will be the revelation of God's essence. And that's what we're asking for. And we ask for it 3 times a day. Why? What is it that we want? We want God's essence to be revealed. This then is the meaning of Kasis Lamor, crushed for the source of light, for the luminary, through the fact that one is crushed. You reach, from the fact that he's in exile, he reaches the essence. The fact that a person, his true desire is the revelation of godliness, to the extent that this cuts to his very core, to the essence of the person. To the extent, how do we know that it hits him to the core? Because he's crushed by it, he's devastated. So this comes from the essence of the soul. Ma'or shebeneshama, the luminary, the source of light in the neshama, the essence. Who has an essential bond with God. Are we doing on time? Okay, so we'll stop over here. So the point is like this. We explain now the connection between Kasis Lamor and the idea that one is crushed from the fact that we're in exile. What's the connection? Because why would one be devastated that he's in exile? If he's not missing anything? He's not missing anything, yet he's devastated. He's cusses. He's completely broken and crushed. That's because at his very core, what does he want? He wants the revelation of godliness. So we see the connection between being devastated and crushed from the fact that you're in exile with the essence of the soul. Because what Why would a person be crushed from the fact that there's no revelation of godliness? Because that is very core. What does he want? He wants that. Since, as he says here, the essence of the soul is essentially bound with God, and what's God's essential desire? God's essential desire is to be revealed in this world. So since the essence of God in his essence, his core, wants to be revealed in this world, so the Jew, whose essence is essentially bound with the essence of God, has the same desire. It's not a different desire. It's that same desire is reflected in the other part of the essence, the part of the essence that's within the person. So when a person reaches this level, where when there's nothing is wrong in life, he's not missing anything, and yet he's still devastated, he's still broken, what is that a function of? It's a function of the essence of the soul. So we see now how the essence of, how Kassus Lamar, that person is crushed from the fact that he's in exile, is connected with the essence of the soul. That higher level of faith that we spoke about. What we still need to answer, and we'll address in chapter 10, is how is this a higher level of the essence of the soul than self-sacrifice? So that we still have to address, and we'll address that in Rosh Hashanah chapter 10.